Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today, we're finally going to be talking about the new album from Tyler the Creator, titled Cherry Bomb. So okay, maybe Odd Future does have a plan after all. I mean, it certainly seems like something is finally up. When I reviewed Earl Sweatshirt's I Don't Like Shit, I Don't Go Outside, I speculated that Odd Future's fading buzz in the mainstream made the release of Earl's record feel like a bit of an anomaly, especially considering the lack of major Odd Future players on it. Well, maybe I should have known better or waited a few weeks, because it wasn't a few weeks later when Odd Future leader Tyler the Creator announced his own record to be released in a week's time with little build-up. Which for me, it was a good thing, because paradoxically, while Tyler the Creator might be the leader of the Odd Future collective, he's probably one of the members of the group that I have the hardest time getting a real handle on as an artist, so thus the more material I release, the better a chance I can get to understanding him. I mean, his accurate contempt for critics who brand him as horrorcore given his complete lack of filter and graphic subject matter, his contempt does have some merit here, mostly because he's the most interesting when you dig deeper into the outsider mentality that exists half in hyperbole and half in very unfiltered, bold-faced honesty. You believe what he's saying because he believes it. He's not rapping to shock, mostly because his audience won't find him shocking, but instead relatable. Parallels have also been made in terms of his subject matter and approach to Ariel Pink, owning the image of the outsider even as the mainstream shows interest for all the wrong reasons, at least to Tyler's point of view. Now, there's a certain degree of hypocrisy to that, considering so much of his buzz and popularity has circled around his controversy, but at least Tyler's somewhat aware of that, so I can kind of excuse it. And yet, I'm not exactly a fan of Tyler the Creator, even beyond all that, and it shouldn't be all that surprising as of why. As I've said in the past, pure, unrelenting nihilism, even when shoved through the lens of confused adolescence, it frequently wears out its welcome if it doesn't have a larger, real point behind it, and Tyler's material can kinda struggle here. I mean, the warped therapy session of Goblin worked for what it was, entirely unsurprising from a teenage kid forced to grow up way too fast and trying to burn through all of his issues, even if it was about 4 songs too long. And then there was the prequel Wolf fleshed out a hall of twisted mirrors and alter egos that were well developed against good production, but did seem to deflect even more from who Tyler really is as a person and an artist. And it was also about 4 songs too long. Incidentally, the whole convoluted narrative behind Tyler's work, it's interesting conceptually, but I don't put a lot of stock in the actual execution of it. I mean, it's well framed and I can overlook the continuity errors lyrically, but I'm often left feeling that it's less than a sum of its parts and doesn't hit me as hard as individual moments and songs on Tyler's work. I often find his stuff works a lot better in pieces than as a complete whole. In any case, when Tyler announced his new record, Cherry Bomb, with no guest appearances from Odd Future members, just like Earl, instead featuring Pharrell, Lil Wayne, and Kanye West, and also a radical departure in sound, well, I was curious to say the least. Earl Sweatshirt had managed to keep up an impressive level of quality with his comeback, so divorced from the twisted continuity of Tyler's earlier releases, maybe Cherry Bomb could stand up well enough in its own world, right? Well, here's the thing. In a way, Cherry Bomb does feel almost completely divorced from Tyler's earlier albums, but after a good dozen listens to this record to fully untangle and understand it, I'm not sure that's a good thing. This album has already proven to be one of the more complicated and divisive hip-hop releases of this year, especially among Tyler's fanbase who probably weren't prepared for this brand of weirdness. But the sad fact is that the more I listened to this record, it just felt less inspired and more just sloppy, unfocused, and lacking in the hard-hitting and more personal content that drew me to Tyler in the first place. And for as much as this album's cherry bombs want to explode like fireworks, instead it feels like they're just being wedged down the toilets like the pranks of Keith Moon of The Who. Which is a reference that makes this album make a warped sort of sense that I only just got now, but bizarrely, I don't think it improves it all that much. So okay, to explain all that, we need to start with the instrumentation and the odd warped dichotomy of sounds on this album. Shimmering, twinkling R&B that feels drenched in the style of old Neptune's tracks, to the point when Pharrell actually shows up, but you wonder what took him so long, to hard-edged walls of abrasion that seem dragged up from hardcore noise rap. The contrast really is jarring, and it really doesn't help matters that the record's flow, considering how often Tyler will undercut some genuinely melodic and potent progressions with these shrill screeching backing vocals or blaring fuzzy synths, or even just letting his melody feel slightly askew, and with a lo-fi focus on how much of the sounds just run together, especially in the dirtier percussion and the horns. More than ever, it reminds me of Ariel Pink, except it's not consistent across the album. It's less of an organic whole and more of a hodgepodge. Lo-fi elements mashed together with clear strings and tinkling pianos, and no matter how many layers of crooning backing vocals from Charlie Wilson Tyler adds, it still just kind of feels off to me. Now, that's not saying saying that there aren't moments that I do like. The more subdued Find Your Wings that managed to come close to nailing that balance that he was going for. I dug the slick horns and strings on Two-Seater, and the mid-song spacey synthesizers of OKAGA, California really reminded me of 70s progressive rock in a really appealing way that did fit with the song's overall sound and arc. But outside of that, for as much as Tyler worships Pharrell, his material is nowhere near the tightness and elegance, and it really does hurt these songs. Instead of coming across a nice sort of grandeur or tight, snapping presence, more often than not, it just feels kind of chintzy and thin. An attempt to sound grand, but not quite having the skill or refinement to get there, just kind of imitating it in his bizarre way. Now, I would say that the noisier, more hardcore elements would fit Tyler better given all that, and given his earlier work, you'd think that it would, but the production on these segments, I'm sorry, it doesn't work. The noisier riffs aren't so much driven by groove or a potent melody, but slathered on in overcompressed, blocky chunks, and none of them have the visceral fire or potency that came from, say, Jenny Death by Death Grips. Now, that's not saying, once again, that there aren't songs that I do like. I mean, DEATHCAMP and Pilot are both solid enough tracks, but the title track, it had the potential to be so much better, and Tyler's production just completely squandered all that, considering he produced the entire album. And in a bizarre artistic choice, Tyler further neuters the potency of this record by mixing his vocals so low that they're frequently drowned out. I can't hear him. Now, this has been defended by some of his fans as an artistic choice, but there's a few points I feel to need to distress to debunk all that. First of all, for as much as you could try to point your finger at Death Grips and say, well, MC Ride did this too. Yeah, no, I'm not a huge Death Grips fan, but my issue with MC Ride was always in his enunciation, not where he was produced and placed within the mix, especially on albums like Jenny Death. To me, it's less of Death Grips and more analogous to Say Yes to Love, the ultra lo-fi Perfect Pussy album that I reviewed last year. Which leads me to my second point. Many people were turned off by how lo-fi and buried the vocals were on that album, but at least fit the overall theme of Say Yes to Love, how the woman's inner voice frequently felt drowned out and swallowed up by a world that would reject her graphic innermost thoughts, and it overall felt cohesive with that record. But what is the reason for Tyler mixing the vocals so low beyond perhaps concealing his moments of rebellion in his verses? And this leads to my third point, in that it doesn't just happen in the more abrasive tracks. Hell, his vocals are pushed so low across the majority of this album, whether it makes sense or not. Hell, even Schoolboy Q feels drowned out on his guest verse, and that should never happen. And this leads to the biggest point. Tyler is the sort of presence with a ton of personality and an immediately distinctive voice. It stands out. This guy has charisma. So why would he mix himself lower to handicap some of that real raw fire? Not only that, we get more examples of his bad flirtation with pitch shifting, the absolute worst example being Keep the O's. Yes, I get what it's trying to do, and I can like the message of the song, but between the synths that sound like malfunctioning power drills and that goddamn chipmunk voice effect that I absolutely can't stand, this song is damn near unlistenable to me, and it's one of the worst songs that I've heard this year, bar none. So on that note, let's talk about lyrics and themes. And you know what, I'll say this, Tyler is improving in terms of his technical rapping skills. I mean, his bars connect more often, he's got less flubbed rhymes, and his creativity does bring more focus to this album. That being said, at this point his usage of homophobic slurs and lines like kill the dark shit like I'm Zimmerman or shout out to Jim Crow, I'm sorry, look, I get that they've got a different purpose, they're obvious metaphors, and they're more for going over the top braggadociousness, but at this point the provocation feels cheap and overdone and not in the best of taste, and I get the feeling even Tyler knows that. Hell, he even hops on the I am a god shtick that Kanye pushes on the collaboration Smuckers with Lil Wayne's collaboration as well, and despite Kanye having the worst bars and the self-deprecating whine bragging that he does, and that terrible couplet about texting God about the size of his dick, I got the impression even Tyler knows it's overdone and overwrought. Now, to be fair, Tyler does try to make some more conscious songs, but it's shot down in mid-stride like on the anti-gangbanging track Run, drawing the implication that most people, even his fans, won't care and don't want to listen to that. Although the recent success of Kendrick Lamar seems to prove him at least somewhat wrong here, but whatever. So, okay, how does Tyler respond to that sort of rejection? Well, he does it with his trademark nihilism. It's the general, screw the world, I'm leaving. He's taking his ball and going home. Almost objectivist, almost recalling Atlas Shrugged in the assertion that if his talent and his ambition won't be appreciated, he'll fly away to the moon with his girl and just get away from it all. Sick of the pressure and attention from the fame, sick of the judgment and the back talk that goes on behind his back, sick of a world that expects him to sell drugs or at least rap about it. He chooses to seize his wings, his internal validation, and fly fly towards the moon, encapsulated in fragmented skits by the Moon Theater, where his art will be displayed and really appreciated. And especially with the 70s inspired synths on the final track, it's hypothetical that Tyler isn't just pointing to Pharrell in his work, but Keith Moon, the legendary drummer from The Who is probably most well known outside of his music for pranks for blowing up toilets on tour with cherry bomb fireworks. Admittedly, bit of a stretch here, but it is a cute reference if it is intentional, especially considering you could draw a number of parallels between Keith Moon and Tyler the Creator in terms of talent and personality, with the big exception being Keith Moon's rampant drug use, obviously. But beyond all that, what does this album add up to? Because to get to that transcendental point for which Tyler is trying to get, we have a meandering album with graphic sex for no real purpose and honestly not entirely recommended, a meandering car brag track where Tyler talks about listening to Mac DeMarco, because of course he does, and half-hearted stabs at revolution, and bizarrely a multi-part love song with an underage girl that would owe something to Gary Puckett and the Union Gap if I didn't feel that Tyler was being both sincere and just trying to bait more controversy. But you know what? As a whole, Cherry Bomb by Tyler the Creator oddly feels transitional more than anything, caught between two styles that Tyler tries to fuse together and mostly can't pull off. It's got the clumsiness of a genuine effort, but also its failings. It shows Tyler's frustration and desire to go in more experimental directions, but his rapping topics feel kind of formulaic, aimless, and thinly sketched, lacking the visceral punch that made his earlier material compelling and personal. I mean, this is not the first time that a rapper has complained about fame before, especially with more visceral energy. And then the moments that are intended to shock on this album that feel less thrilling and more tacked on, cheap, and unnecessary. I can appreciate the experimentation, and you'll definitely won't hear many records like this in 2015, if any at all, but to me, it's a 5 out of 10 and only a recommendation to hardcore Odd Future and Tyler the Creator fans, and even some of them are divided on this record at this point. I mean, I appreciate Tyler firing his cherry bombs at the moon, but maybe he should have just been better just blowing up a good toilet. Just saying. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. Yeah, folks, I was trying to like this, but what did you think? Did it work for you? Not quite for me. But if there's any other albums you want me to cover, or if there's anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm more than happy to give it all a listen. Until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.